So, this week, as we all know, Jeff Beck passed away unexpectedly, which was a shock to a lot of people. And as we all know, a lot of people are suddenly passing away at the moment. I don't know if he was one of those or not. But it was a shock because he's looked so fit and healthy with the same haircut, the same style for the last 50 years. Such a sense of vitality and creativity. It's just quite weird because I didn't hear about it for a few days, and I don't think a lot of people heard about it initially. And then I saw it mentioned in passing, and then I saw people on music sites and forums talking about it, and it's so strange. I mean, a lot of musicians have passed away recently, and a lot of them a lot younger than Jeff. I think the younger ones are probably all safe and effective people, but there's a storm raging outside at the moment, and I'm not sure if it'll be picked up on the microphone, but it's a suitable metaphor for what we all feel on various levels of consciousness and subconsciousness about the world, about the dying of an old world and the waiting for a new world to be born, and for us to look around and see what it is and how we can help co-create it. It's like the long echo of an era finally coming to an end. But so strange. The last few months I've been listening to Jeff Beck a lot. I just bought this before Christmas, which is the Japanese version of Japanese first pressing of Wired. That's the poster. It's nice pressing. The second album produced by George Martin, featuring Jan Hammer. Classics of Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. And I picked this up a while ago, like the last 6 months, in a market. Beautiful copy of Blow by Blow, the first album he had produced with George Martin. Really sublime album with mix of strings, electronics, guitar, rock and fusion. And years ago I'd picked up this Sunday's reissue of Truth, the Jeff Beck group with Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart on vocals. The album, people are always surprised that exists when they think of Rod Stewart as a singer for Housewives. But there he is getting the heavy blues rock in just before the first Led Zeppelin album, sort of produced by Mickey Most when he trying to turn Jeff Beck into a pop star with Hi-Ho Silver Lightning. Classic albums. And I've been listening to these nearly every day the last few months, particularly as I love instrumental music, and a few weeks back I watched the documentary that came out a few years ago. Just was looking for something to watch, and I found there was the full-length version of that online about his whole career. And I saw the edited version of that probably on BBC4 when it was first broadcast, maybe around 2018. I watched that again, the full hour-and-a-half version of that, just a few weeks ago. So it strikes me really weird that he suddenly passed away. And reading the music forums and blogs, and you can see how shocked people are that he's just suddenly gone. He was so vital. And I suppose, like, the point of my little miniature trilogy collection on vinyl, as you know, that you can have an infinite number of MP3s and streams and favorite YouTube videos, but it means something tangible to have those original analog pressings, which sound amazing for all their frequencies, and to have the sense of a band playing in a room with you with the speakers cranked up. It's almost like, here's some proof that I'm actually a fan, and I'm not jumping on algorithmic bandwagons. Get some views as people Google, who is Jeff Beck? What is Jeff Beck known for? What is Jeff Beck's life story? Who did Jeff Beck play with? And, you could look all those things up. But for me, he was one of those pioneers of the original rock era. And I started watching a whole bunch of videos, and one of the best is the live at Ronnie Scott's from, I think, around 2007, because I saw him live in Dublin and Vicar Street around that time. It must have been around 2007 or 2008, when he still had that same band with Tal Wickenfield on bass. And I have that memory seared in my mind where the two of them were on stage playing, and he walked over to her and put his fingers on the neck of her bass and was, playing along on her bass while he was playing guitar and while she was playing bass at the same time. And just, the smiles on their faces and the laugh they were having, the joy in it. And you see that in the really good video of that band playing at Crossroads Guitar Festival in 2007, and on the Ronnie Scott DVD, which you should watch if you've never seen it. And then I saw him again, I'm not sure what year it was, maybe 2016, 2015, the Olympia in Dublin, and it was with a totally different band, and it was much more like a rock band, like a heavier guitar sound, and you could almost feel a bit disappointed not to see him again, particularly with Tal on bass, because she's so great and such a great vibe. But you realise what was so great about Jeff was he was never a nostalgic artist. he was never interested in giving you the hits. He was always going forward with a new band, new players, a different drummer, a different bass player. Always looking for a new sound, new collaborations. There's like those fantastic clips of him playing, and he has Imogen Heap on vocals. And then a few years back, he did, The Revolution Will Be Televised with this female duo who I think were from, I can't remember what the name of their band was. They did an album, and in all that stuff, you always see sometimes long-term fans kind of scratching their heads or skipping that album. Maybe I'll skip that one, I'll check out the next one, or I'll skip that show and I'll check him out the next show. And he was only playing live in the last 6 months. I think last year, he was doing a show with Johnny Depp on vocals, and people, were skipping that, saying, "Oh, I don't really want to see him with Johnny Depp," But he was always someone very open to collaboration and trying something new. Such an opposite to seeing any of those very mouldy people like Paul McCartney, the Rolling Stones, Elton John. Name your favorite dinosaur. Jeff was always progressing, looking for that new sound, and vital in his playing. It's so interesting. Like, there's so much emotion in his playing. Like the feeling of the soul being transmuted into his fingers, moving the strings into the vibration of music and frequency, and giving us something almost tangible, the sound passing by in the temporal moment, forming music in the air, and hearing sheer beauty. And when you hear him interviewed and talk, he's such a straightforward, really down to earth person, who probably spent more time, working on old cars and putting them back together. Those great guitarists of the 70s who I love as well, like Santana and John McLaughlin, they pictured themselves very seriously, with their Indian guru in their white robes and sort of holy and devout, and the back of Return to Forever album covers that has, thanks to L. Ron Hubbard for inspiration and support. And the 70s was full of gurus, from the Maharishi to Meher Baba, and in that whole atmosphere, Jeff Beck seemed such a straightforward person and down to earth, and not someone you ever imagined, talking about his like metaphysical experience of God and spirituality and views on, religion, or you never hear him lecturing on anything like that. But when you listen to his music, to his instrumental music, it's so filled with the sense of the spirit, of trying to translate the spirit coming into this world and being pushed through into something that we could understand in musical terms. And you sort of realize, listening to him and watching those gigs, and being lucky to catch him those few times live in person, that what great music does. A great musical artist who has a unique, idiosyncratic style that he's translating his virtuosic skill into is somehow opening doors to feelings and emotions and ideas and sense impressions of reality. And he's not just what a great artist isn't just doing in opening a door for himself in a flow state of incredible improvisation and openness to the moment, to the living now, where we all reside amidst all the distraction and deceit and illusion and delusion and confusion and contusion. You know, you hear a great artist is taking a feeling from their heart of like opening a portal, a doorway to a spiritual dimension and pouring forth love and joy and sadness and melancholy. And we're watching that and we're not just sucking on it like a vampire. It's like it's opening doors in us, in emotions we didn't know we had, or emotions we'd forgotten we had, or emotions we'd buried, you know, and like the raw vulnerability of Imogen Heap's vocals. It's amazing, and all we can sort of do is like clap at the end of the song, or you know, burst into tears, you know, and like for being a living creature, you know, and you know, I always think funny thing like going a little tangent, you know, cameo appearance is that cats are attracted to what you are putting your energy onto, so they come to investigate. So if you have a desk, you never want to be doing a recreation of making a model of the Bismarck, or you know, because they'll come and destroy it, you know. But they're curious creatures. I think they're entwined with human energy, and probably the ancient Egyptians knew that, and how perhaps they perceive into the astral realm. But anyway, that's another topic. Let's not derail this short video. But I feel that so strongly that like watching those clips. I watched that clip of the song Nadia um, about 10 times there today, and Imogen Heap doing Blanket, and Train kept it rolling. And maybe over the weekend I'll watch the whole show. But I was just thinking, you know, how a great artist opens a doorway in themselves for this to flow through, and we in the audience making a sort of energetic connection and completion of the circuit. Just watching it is an incredible thing, because it lets us feel those emotions that we had forgotten or buried or repressed or ignored, or reminds us of those emotions we haven't processed through, and how great art and great beauty allows us to feel those things. And it's not something vicarious like watching Love Island or I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Those things to me seem to be about teaching people to perceive and respond and passively watch people in a kind of vampiric state. But a connection to music feels so deep. It's like music is the closest you can get to understanding such strange and abstract ideas of metaphysics and like the etheric field or the astral realm, which can all seem, weird or ridiculous or crazy or whatever. But in music, they give a sense of our soul is something flowing through from some other place into this place. It's like a translation. It's like the nearest or closest translation you can get to what the Godhead is, and like hearing Jimi Hendrix improvise on a solo, and you get that with Jeff Beck and John McLaughlin and Santana, and but just thinking about it all, it makes me think how over the last 2 years of the sniffles, the epoch of the sniffles and the lockdowns and the collective insanity of how much of that hasn't been fully processed by any of us, and particularly by me. The only live gig I went to over the last 2 years, 3 years, was John McLaughlin last May. That's the first thing I went to, and I haven't been to anything else since. I did buy a ticket to see Van Morrison next month, and I've seen him once before, and it was an amazing show. So something to look forward to in a way. You see, what I was thinking watching those live YouTube clips and those clips of those huge crowds at the Crossroads Guitar Festival, and the scenes of like the little Ronnie Scott's club, it's all of this like lost era. It made me feel like I could weep for that whole era. Is like a lost time and place. For me, the end of the 90s to the 2019, I suppose you could say, like, yeah, that 20-year period, I went to hundreds of gigs. I saw nearly everybody I wanted to see, and it's like at that, those days, it was like the most important thing in the world was getting a ticket to a gig and getting some weed to put in your ear before the gig. Open up your third ear and enjoy the show. And those were like the biggest things happening in our lives, apart from, personal things and so on and so forth. I won't bore anybody with, but just in terms of like our lifestyle and our consumerism, and our like entertainment, those were like the most important things. Going to those shows, and it was around that time, around that 2007, I saw Jeff Beck the first time, which was incredible. And I remember around those same years, I saw John Martin, being coming on stage in, I think, Vicar Street. Coming on stage in a wheelchair because he'd had his leg amputated. But then he, plugs in his guitar and he's wailing like Jimi Hendrix, And I saw him once more before he died. Around that same time, I saw Arthur Lee, one of the few times he came to Dublin. An amazing gig, a man who looked just so happy, not to be in prison and to be on the road playing this 50-year-old music that was being greeted as a long lost classic, and he was just riding the wave of that. And music, more than so many other types of art form, is all about an energy between musicians and audience. And just thinking of Jeff Beck passing away, it just really makes me think, I could weep for that end of that whole era that came 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And when all the restrictions ended, I was in no rush to go into a cinema, to a restaurant, to a cafe, to a gig. I felt very shell-shocked. I felt like a flipping World War One soldier who was still in shell shock, that I'm going to go into this cafe and people are going to start arguing with me that you're not joining in the group psychosis. Because I never bent the knee, and I never covered my face, and I never took the juice and ate the soup, and killed my soul, not for anything in this world. And like I said, I didn't go to a gig till John McLaughlin. I saw John McLaughlin was playing in May, end of May in Dublin, and I only bought the ticket at the very last moment because I was sort of going back and forth in my mind, do I really want to, am I bothered? But then I thought, he turned, I think, 81 and had gone back on the road, and a great gig, and a second time seeing him, and it was great. He was older, but there is still joy in his eyes and in his playing. And in those 2 years of our corporate fascist cosplaying, role-playing game, and to the backdrop of the magical theatre of the absurd blaring out of every orifice of television, radio, and internet, in a total insanity. I had no desire to rush back to the cinema and restaurants and pubs, and I just thought, you're all flipping sellouts, and who do I boycott? And it's almost like you'd have to boycott the whole lot of them for their lack of morality and spirituality and common sense. And I know there weren't people who went along with it, but I didn't see a lot of it where I was. A lot of resistance, I didn't see a lot of it, and could only make one feel very bitter, shocked, traumatized, confused, and cynical, very cynical, and as I've said in different things about realizing that so much of what before that I would have thought that were like abstract, intellectual, philosophical explorations and digressions and mental masturbations all came home to reveal that thoughts about who had a soul and who didn't have a soul, and who was an automaton and who was a human being, and it was all very real. It was all very real. And what people like Steiner and Gurdjieff and Ouspensky were telling us 100 years ago in their era, looking at the madness of a world going through the First World War, that what they were telling us weren't the words of tricksters and cranks and eccentrics and weirdos. It was all very real information about our reality and who we share with and what our task is in this world, and being a creative, organic, sovereign human being with free will, and that we shared it with strange creatures who look like us but would happily put us on trains to the camps, you know. I mean, I read Solzhenitsyn when I was a teenager, you know. That's the sort of person I was. I read all these things and read history, but everyone else had been pre-programmed by smartphones to only read headlines from the centralized scrutinizer. But I won't go on about that. I'm only saying that in the context of Jeff Beck passing away, it brings so much of that back to me, of what we're living through and what the era was before it, and what my life was like in those years of that sort of 20-year period from the late 90s to 2019, and what we imagined for ourselves, and all the bad things and dark things. I was quite aware of, but you're always kind of imagining those are things going to happen in some time in the future, and then to see them put it all out for real in this era, and you go, oh, flippin' heck, we're actually going to live through in a historical epoch. We're actually living through like a once in 100-year time period. And you know, you could I was thinking, you know, like the thing with these albums is I'm sort of what I'm trying to say is that, you know, this is music I've actually been listening to like every day and for months, and I've become so, I'm one of those people who's become so cynical about who any of these people were who purported to be heroes on pedestals of rock, on how we see them over the last 2 years as being nothing more than pathetic puppets living in a gilded cage, and who always lived on a short chain for all their wealth and fame. We saw Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Ringo Starr, Elton John, who else was there? Dave Grohl, you name them. They were saying you gotta take the juice to go to the show. We found out that they all sold themselves out for a very cheap price, and that they were always puppets. They were always puppets and system pigs and pathetic people. You know, rock and roll was always about what you could call soft power, about being an influencer, about nudging behavior, about experimental psychological testing and cultural transformation and propaganda. And we have to look back at it all askance and see how few of these people were ever worth thinking of being any kind of hero. And a lot, and you have to add, Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey to that as well, And who did we have? We had, Van Morrison, Ian Brown, and Eric Clapton, who unfortunately had to wake up in the most painful way possible. And I'd become so cynical about these people, and you see them all gradually passing away, and we see, they're not so important to anyone after all. They only needed them to be a cultural influencer into this era. Like in the first year of the lockdown, they had that worldwide concert. I can't remember what it was called. It was something like One World or something like that, where they had video clips of all the different people, like Elton John and Rolling Stones, sending clips in, and they were shown simultaneously around the world. And he sort of thought, oh yeah, is that why we've had the Stones around for so many years, so they could be maintained, to be deployed as cultural influence? It gave you a sense that if the most important thing in your life was going to a rock concert or a football match or a nightclub or a restaurant or going to a beach in Spain or a cruise ship, it's almost as if you've been trained over the years to think and feel like those are the most important things in your life, to have that to continue having them, you now take the juice. And to do that was just unbelievable to me, that people would sell their souls so cheaply. It never entered my mind that, if I was never going to go to a concert again, fine. That was fine with me. I'm not going. But to see people sell themselves so cheaply, to have so little sense of their own soul and their sense of how important that is, like the responsibility of that, of being a sovereign, organic being with free will, that you carry a responsibility and duty of spirit within you. And seeing these wretched people, wretched celebrities from everybody, like from Michael Caine to your favourite, to God knows who, Justin Bieber, or it's like whoever your age appropriate, cultural appropriate celebrity influencer is, there they were selling themselves as a prostitute for pharmaceutical companies. It's so sickening, and it makes me so cynical and misanthropic. And to see all those celebrities being injured and passing away now, I have no feelings for them. If I see someone pass away and I liked their music, I just and I read comments of people saying how upset they are, and I'm just looking very coldly at this, thinking, why are you so upset? You don't know this person. They're not a friend. They're not a family member. They're not a relative. You don't know them. You don't know anything about them apart from a public image. Why are you so upset? Like, for instance, I'll tell you, I love the music of the Rolling Stones. I think that's some of the greatest rock and roll ever made. They were the greatest rock and roll band, not a rock band. They were rock and roll going back to the original music that had the roll in it, the swing. The people, I don't know them. They seem like reptilian, cold narcissistic people, like a lot of them, like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, and they all seem repulsively narcissistic and self-absorbed, living in bubbles, looking out at the plebs, sort of oblivious to people spending €200 on a ticket. Oh, people spend €200 on a ticket. Oh yeah, whatever. And the people doing that, those ticket prices are your fault for paying them. They're always pushing you to see, would you pay that much to go, and you paid, so they put them up. Simple as that. But I felt nothing for any of these people. I see people passing away, and I think, oh, I like that song or that album, or oh yeah, they've passed away. Oh yeah, so I don't know them. I've no emotion invested in them, and I don't know Jeff Beck. But I was shocked. I was shocked myself, just seeing the belated news of his passing, the surprise of it, and reading other people's surprise. And I don't know the circumstances, so I'm not getting into that. But watching those video clips, and like the Ronnie Scott's, reminding me of those times, it's like, even though we had all kinds of things going on in our lives in those years, it was still, it was still like a simpler time. It's strange to say, isn't it? Because I'm not talking about growing up in the 1950s. I'm talking about like 2007. Like we were all initiated on that day in 2001. We were all initiated into a new era, and we were like counting down the days of our of a easy consumer lifestyle. It was, I think for those of us sort of awakening, we all knew we were kind of on borrowed time, but still we're always thinking the future, something decades away, but then it lands on our door, and we have to find out what our metal is, what we're made of, and what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. And I think just thinking of that era and what I was doing brings it all back, really. It brings it all back, that how much of it we're still haven't processed or caught up with, as we see the latest madness, as the normies are caught up in the next headline and the next headline and the next story and the next distraction and the next absurdity. The latest installation from Hieronymus Bosch in Living Flesh, the next episode of the soap opera and the magical theatre of the absurd that we find ourselves in as we struggle to find the door to leave, and I realize I could weep for realizing what we've all lost, the time we've lost in the last few years, time we won't get back, and the way of life we had, and the innocence we had, and the easiness we had, and the freedom we had, and to realize we're surrounded by people who don't want freedom. They don't want it. They don't want the responsibility of free will, and They don't want that burden. They just want to be told what to do as long as they can watch the TV and eat junk food. They don't give a damn. Um, and it's all been like an alchemical fire testing us and realizing that it was always a narrow path through this and through to the other side of what you'd be willing to give up. Um, sometimes I thought, would I just put my whole record collection on a bonfire for all their subliminal influence on MK Ultra experimentation and nefarious drug culture and associations to terrible and disgusting people, should it all just go on a bonfire? And in some ways, like, rock music was all a great, initiation and into a new age, into like the false light of a new age. But the beautiful things that moved us and inspired us, they still matter. Like I said, listening to the beauty of Jeff Beck's purely instrumental music. It's like, what's most important is how it inspired us to be creative people in our own way. Celebrity confuses us so much because we think of creative success as being equal to celebrity. It corrupts us from being in touch with our own creativity and our own power and ability, because the normies are trained to respect the kind of halo effect of celebrity. So if you're a teenage guitarist in your bedroom, or you're painting or drawing, and people around you don't see you rewarded by celebrity, they don't really understand or sort of respect what you're doing. They wait for the external validation, but the true creativity is the creation of your life in harmony with your true self, with the knowledge of your true self, of the work of know thyself. And creation flows out as a means of interacting with reality. That a true creative person is one who has to create, who naturally creates as being a part and an interactive part of reality. It's not for the validation and the appearance on the chat show. That's like the raising of the tall poppy to be raised up and then chopped down. Because like the last few years, I had done very little of anything creative. I'd stopped making any of my own music. I wasn't writing. I wasn't doing much of anything but watching like old movies and stuff, and sort of waiting to see, following things closely and following them too closely, and putting far too much of my own energy into the what might happen next. And what might happen next will never be ending. It will always be draining your life force. It's important to remember that there's always another absurdity. There's always something to pour your energy into, like to be angry, to get really angry over Biden or Trump, you know. Doesn't matter which in the dualistic base code layer of reality. Doesn't matter what the charge is running, positive or negative, as long as you're giving it to something rather than to yourself and your own creativity. And, listening to Jeff Beck again today is that feeling, of those little doors being opened in yourself, like remembering your own emotions you haven't felt and feelings you haven't processed and what you could weep for that has been lost. Because ultimately, what the last few years have done is either make us give up a part of our soul to something deeply evil, or it has made us self-destruct in despair and destructive behavior, or it's pushed us into a chrysalis and cocoon that's been waiting to come back to life. And in this year, another great year of change and a funny year in it, adding up to 7, which has symbolism you can project onto. And coming into now, I think next month, the year of the rabbit. Run, rabbit, run. The time to leave the chrysalis is now. Because for all that has happened in the last few years and all that has happened in your life, the time is now for that to be alchemically transmuted into new energy, new life, new creations and creativity that we co-create with the great creator, the source of all sources in this world, and create the life that we always wanted, that we always could envisage for ourselves, but we're somehow afraid to, or held ourselves back, or didn't think was possible, or whatever programs we were running or subconsciously running, or whatever garbage was still in the back of our minds from our childhoods or whatever. The time is now. Now is the place to create, the place where magic happens, the place where our attention lies. Now is the only time where you can change anything, where you can affect change and create and pour forth your creativity. This is the time. We are all passing through, and we will all eventually join the great mothership in the sky and see what lies on the other side of the mirror. But if I believe anything, I believe we're here to create. And if you're a creative person, creativity is how we understand, it's how we process. If you're not processing through what you feel and what you carry and all the weight on your shoulder, then you're internalizing it, and you're getting bitter, and you're alchemically creating disease in your mind and body by not letting that energy flow through. And it's what a great musician does, is flow feelings through in how music only exists in the moment. It doesn't exist in the past, it doesn't exist in the future. Those notes hanging in the air only exist in the present, in the now. And they're all like doorways and windows and portals. And they correspond to our mind and our throat and our voice and our heart and our spine, our body, our movement, and our ideas. And the time is now. What are you waiting for? We're here to create. And God bless Jeff.